afternoon, everybody. My name is Kireet Kokala. I am a GSU alum, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the Graphene Bridge. I'm the main author of this book, and it's going to be available starting early spring 2025. And the book is about graphene, AI, quantum computing, and atomic batteries. So before I launch right into it, I just want to get a quick scan of the room. Raise your hand if you've heard of AI. A lot of hands, okay. How about quantum computing? More hands. Atomic batteries? Okay. Okay, there you go, one hand, that's good. I like that. So we'll take a quantum leap into this talk, and I hope to keep it very interactive. We have a jam-packed agenda. I'm going to talk about the motivations behind the Graphene Bridge, and then we'll segue into graphene's role. How is it a bridging technology and AI enabler when we talk about advanced topics like quantum computing and atomic batteries? And that's going to allow us a good segue into current applications, real-world applications, and what are we seeing in the future. And that will finally allow us to get into some more career opportunity talks and ending in the official Q&A session. I will say that I've sprinkled the lecture with a couple of slides here and there where we will get into something a little more interactive, so I can get your feedback as the audience as well. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions so that we can keep it interactive. And I promise if I don't know the answer, I'll be resourceful enough to get you an answer. All right. Well, I'm incredibly grateful to Georgia State University, Dr. King, and the ACM, the Student ACM chapter, for hosting me here today. It couldn't be here without your efforts behind the scenes, so thank you once again, DevOps team, for doing that. But I'm also incredibly grateful to my best friend James Peterson, who's here from Chicago supporting me and representing my whole family on this endeavor. So thank you, James, for coming out here and doing this with me. Very quick disclaimer. You can read that. All we're saying is this is a technical discourse. It's meant for educational purposes only. If you would like any access to the materials, or if you want to be successful in some field like graphene or AI and you'd like to refer to some of this, or you want to reproduce some of it, feel free to reach out. There's going to be QR codes over there that you can scan, and I'll feature that in the slides as well, so you can connect and see how you can go about that, because we want to be invested in your success as well as students, entrepreneurs, and so on and so forth. Okay. Like I said, we'll keep the talk active and engaged. So how are you going to make the most of this talk? Well, take mental notes. I'm sure you'll ask questions. But also think about the real-world applications. Think about how graphene, AI, quantum computing, atomic batteries, cybersecurity, all the topics we touched on, the subject areas and the sub-areas, are going to be akin to what you currently do and where you want to go. Chart a course and start making those connections now, right? And then obviously you'll have some opportunities to connect via LinkedIn. And I would welcome you to look into Hitachi Vantara, the company where I work. I'm the director of Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Analytics, director of data science in short. And Hitachi as a company is 600 companies across the world. And we have our hands embedded in everything from satellite technology to data storage, nuclear, rail, and energy. So take your pick. There are a lot of opportunities for internships, jobs, speaking engagements, so on and so forth, and you can feel free to refer me in your application process. Okay, a couple of background sort of pointers. The goal that I had was not to initially write a book. It was to assimilate knowledge and relay wisdom. But in doing so, we produce a lot of those raw facts and data so you can form your own conclusions in the book. By way of a background, right, I've looked at graphene as a particle, as a discovery since 10 plus years. So I've had my hooks into it. I myself have a blended background of 18 plus years in IT. So I look at my undergrad, which was in biology, my grad stuff, which was computer science, natural language processing, and I thought, hey, this is a great medium, a great nexus to join forces. And that's why I started thinking about graphene and other disciplines. And if you take that forward and you mix it in with a little bit of public speaking, because we do need to educate the masses on what graphene is, what it is, and what can it do. What is it bridging, really, right? And what are some other materials which are kind of outside the scope of this lecture? What are those looking like, right? And then finally, that gave way to some research and collaboration. We have over 30 plus articles that we've cited. I've read over 100. There are a lot of books that we cite in the book. And then ultimately I found a research partner, or my co-author, who's representing the business side, right? And that's how you kind of get to a book in general. I'm oversimplifying here, of course. There's a lot of creative writing processes, there's a lot of brainstorming, but it's very interesting. It's kind of an extension of a graduate project, if you will, but a passion project as such. Okay, so without further ado, we'll just jump right in. You probably have not heard of graphene, you've heard of its cousin, graphite.
Is it Buckminster fullerene is similar to it?
It's similar.
Yeah, C60.
Yes, yes, correct. Now, graphite though, for most people who don't know the chemical composition and such, it's in your pencils, number 4, number 2 pencils, you know, for art supplies. That's what people think of when they think of graphite. But since the 40s and the 90s, the applications of graphite grew, but what we lacked back then as a worldwide apparatus was isolation mechanisms, refinement mechanisms. And if you dial the needle forward, in 2004 we had a milestone event. Dr. Gim and Novoselov, they were able to isolate graphene. Not the highest quality, 100% pure graphene, but they used the Scotch tape method and had the smallest particles together. And they were able to synthesize the first effective version of graphene, for which they got a Nobel Prize in 2010. But if you then look at graphene since 2010, 14, which is when I heard of it, the applications grew. USPTO, which is the US Patent Office, has thousands of patents. And it's either graphene directly or graphene tech. And that's just the US. Think about Europe and Asia Pac. This is a phenomenal material. It's a wonder material as such. And we'll go right into some of the properties as to why graphene is so great, where it is, and how is it going to get integrated with the technologies that we take for granted now, like cell phones, cars, EVs, the list goes on. And I'm going to do my best to keep it summarized because the book does it justice. Right? We go into extreme detail and explore these properties in the book. So at the top, you have certain configurations of graphene. One of them looks like a buckeball, and the other one is a long strands, plus you have flattened sheets of graphene. If you look at sort of these top 7 properties, the biggest thing that stood out to me was its tensile strength. The material that's about 150 times stronger than steel by weight. That's incredible, right? And if you add that in with electrical conductivity, something that can conduct electricity better than copper, better than silicone, sounds like there's a material that's being eyed at to replace silicone in chips. Start thinking about Moore's law. At some point, you can only put so many circuits on a computer chip. There are already breakthroughs in quantum computing. We'll talk about a few of them. And the materials being used are not just silicon. That itself is a bridging concept. So if you then take that with other properties like thermal conductivity, where there's a good heat dissipation, near invisible thickness, a single atom thick material, right? The application's just really on the right. I'm not going to go through all of those. But they really go from RPA, industrial revolution type stuff, to AI processors, cooling for AI chips, AR, VR interfaces, so virtual reality. There's going to be a lot of military applications here too that I've not covered. But mostly I wanted to also highlight there's something here called neuromorphic computing. Does any CS major recognize that? Yes?
No, I don't, but can I guess what it is?
Yeah, please go ahead. What do you think that is?
Neuromorphically sound like dealing with the brain, so some sort of brain-computer interface.
Close, very good. So neuromorphism means computing that's been made to mimic how the brain thinks. Machine learning, deep neural networks, when you have neuron chains and dendrites forming, well that's how we use CNNs and GANs nowadays, right? So that's an example of neuromorphic computing. And how do you take that concept and go faster, more accurately, right? So you do need, on the physical level, something that can handle the air tolerance. And that's an advanced concept right there, but I just wanted to let you know, it's not typical, this is atypical. Having one material do all this and then some, that's why it caught my attention a while back, right? Okay, I didn't reproduce all the images from the book here, but just at a high level, this is a taxonomy of AI. It is not the taxonomy because it gets very detailed. As you know, machine learning, generative AI, neural networks, these are all kind of subsets of each other, if you will. In the book, we talk about 3 or 4 layers deep into each space, but at a higher level, artificial intelligence has tenets like, or sub-areas like natural language processing, speech cognition, syntax, semantics together. You do it offline, you do it online, you do it in near real time, doesn't matter. That still comes under AI. But what enables AI is machine learning, you know. An automaton that keeps learning over time, gets corrected with training data, you train a model. And that's just one way of reinforcing it, right? You have supervised, unsupervised. You guys know that better than I do. But this is just at a very high level, D trees, decision trees, right? And then you have that neural core. Someone recognized it there. The neuromorphic computing, well, that's a neural network. It's kind of modeled after the human brain, but it also takes on the nuances and faults, right? So, again, as you kind of map all this out, you get to something like generative AI, the chat GPTs, the transpose models, and that's where you have language modeling, summarization, or expansion also, some possibilities. And this is what graphene is going to revolutionize. It already is doing that, but I think we're at the low before we get to the peak, and you start seeing a lot more integration of this great technology. I think we're getting very close to our first critical thinking point. So I just want to amp it up a little more. In the book, we have 3 parts. The first part is AI, right? The second is quantum computing, and the third is atomic batteries. There is a 4th part that's kind of laced loosely, which is cybersecurity and the security implications. So graphene by itself is just a material. What it will do, or what it's already doing, is it's enhancing neural networks, as in, well, let me give you an easier example, IoT, the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Everything has sensors. How good are they? Who in here has had any experience with a small IoT project? Anybody? Okay. Adreno processors, these sorts of things?
Arduino and
Okay, good.
Raspberry Pi, yes, sir.
Raspberry Pi, wonderful. When these came out, how was the error tolerance? Do you think it was low or high?
It was low.
Yeah, exactly. These were error prone, I mean, and you could really trust the data. You had to really refine it. But now you can kind of trust what's coming out, right?
Yeah.
If your smartwatch tells you you're having a heart attack, you may go, oh my gosh, what's up with the sensor? So that's what we're going to try and improve with graphene, that error tolerance for a lot of sensors. And that's just one topic in the book where we talk about how do you improve sensor mechanisms. We talk about heat dissipation and all those amazing properties. Well, a sensor on my smartwatch and a sensor in a nuclear plant are 2 separate things. So I want you to start thinking about those mega applications of this material as well. The next part of this intellectual sandwich is quantum computing, right? And when we have graphene-based quantum cryptography and other techniques in the book, we get into something called quantum key distribution and ways to harden current cryptography algorithms, break them, harden them, right? When you contrast quantum computing with a general computer, the general computers are binary, 0s and 1s. What about quantum computers? 0s and 1s, or?
They exist in one state of superposition, so they can
Superposition.
exist in both states.
Yes, 0s and 1. So that's kind of the Schrodinger's principle aspect of making a spin state both 0s and 1s. But to get to that, you need to do what to the quantum chip? You need to keep it high temperature or low temperature?
Low temperature.
Super low temperature. Yes. And what happens as the temperature increases? Does the error tolerance stay, or do we get errors? Errors. Correct. So that itself is a huge problem, right? As you get a quantum AI computer that you want to go on Amazon, like you have your Firebase and stuff, you want to have access to a quantum machine, well, they're going to have an energy crisis. So we talk about how to sort of mimic that problem and improve on that situation and reduce the energy footprint in the book. Last but not least, atomic batteries. So an atomic battery is nothing but nuclear isotopes decaying. And how do you take that component and remove the radioactive principles, have a synthetic isotope, if you will, and have it in the footprint of a lithium-ion battery? As an example, I'm exaggerating there. But there's a way to then go from graphene to quantum computing to atomic batteries. And the book kind of has an interesting way where we've stitched all this together, right? So before we get into other aspects, here's a quick critical thinking checkpoint. If you will, just imagine that there's a graphene-powered AI platform and it's achieving near real-time problem solving. Do you see any ethical concerns? Now, I'll give you an example. Let's say my watch is graphene-powered and there's an AI chip in there, but it's sensing that I'm feeling a little anxious and it says this person's at 80% or higher rate of a nervous attack or some sort of shutdown, and you have an AI agent saying, well, call the paramedics. Do you see any ethical concerns there? What if your eyeballs are being tracked, eyeball movements are being tracked when you take an exam, and you accidentally look somewhere else, and that goes, oh, they want just cheating. Call the cops. You go, I wasn't cheating, I was just looking at the time. Well, there's a clock over there. Well, you know, that's a mechanism that's not been corrected, but it's near real time. So I just want you to think about this question, because it will come up in the next slide, in terms of a larger guidance framework. So this is directly from the book. Right? As I mentioned, we have AI, quantum computing, atomic batteries, and we've given a lot of thought to security. Because no matter which field you pick, this is ubiquitous. It's part of that framework, that no matter which field you go into. And what's really important here is, yes, we've laced graphene as a bridge in there, but graphene is nothing without proper governance mechanisms, right? Without thinking about the environment, right, governance, and the social impact, you're not going to get far with a nascent technology, right? It's not been around for 30, 40 years. It's kind of new. And we get into, this is a higher level aspect of thinking about, hey, graphene having a deep impact on AI, quantum computing, atomic batteries, but more so a framework of problem solving. No matter which part of this diagram you pick, and you go, well, I don't need a bridge between AI and atomic batteries. I just need to work about security and atomic batteries. Great. You do have graphene, you know, enabling that handshake and improving on that handshake. Okay, so that's just meant to help you think about how graphene kind of connects the dots here. Okay, before we get into sort of battery text, because I do have a diagram explaining quantum batteries in a little more detail. There are real-world applications right now of graphene. I already talked about wearable technologies as an example, but there's also ultra-sensitive sensors. You think about robotic process automation, sensors that are not like drones or anything, but are much smaller. And you need them to be fault-tolerant and withstand extreme temperatures. Exosensors, sensors that go on satellites. You know, you can really start thinking about this terraforming sort of concept with space technology, space tourism. So there's a ready market for graphene right now. Smart cities and digital infrastructure that are enabling everything from EVs to other devices to get charged when you're driving at a certain speed. That's just one example. Or scans, body scans at airports without being invasive, right? That sort of technology is already there, and it's AI driven. It's an AI enabler and catalyst. There's already cybersecurity that we talked about, but the last concept here is atomic innovations. How do you get to sustainable atomic sources? Data centers have a huge footprint. Another tidbit here for anybody in the room. AI problems take place on CPUs or GPUs?
GPUs.
Why? Is that why GPU was invented, to do AI? No. Does anybody know why GPUs came about to be in the first place?
Complex stuff.
That's
multiplication.
Correct. And that multiplication was used for shader language when graphic processor units were created. Something called shader language existed, it still does, to do simple games, simple or complex math. When you multiply, right? You want to get the idea right of where's the shadow being cast? Is it here or there? That's the kind of math it was meant for. It wasn't meant for AI. That's why now you have something called a TPU, tensor processing unit. Has anybody heard of an NPU? Neural processing unit.
There is something called Majorana 1 which came late recently for quantum computing.
For quantum computing, yep. They researched it for over 10 years. The Majorana particles have been in existence for a very long time. Again, that's a topic outside of the scope of the book, the full impact of a topology. So what he's talking about is a new quantum chip that's come out. Does it need special? The anode is graphite still, so it's close enough to graphene, it's not quite there. And the cathode is a metal oxide, and you have something called capacitance, which is the capacity to hold charge. So not only is this a future component, but it is current technology that's being researched, where you don't want to create a brand new battery, you just want to use what's already there and improve upon that charge cycle for a lithium-ion battery. Graphene-based anodes and cathodes, easy to do, right? The charge, the flow won't change. What will change though, based on all that knowledge that you've seen so far, is what? The capacitance goes up. We've talked about surface area. You have strength. The battery can be very robust. It's not going to break. It can be a smaller footprint because of how thin graphene is. Thermal conductivity, and then charging cycles. You charge your phone today, is it going to charge the same a year from now? No. Why? It's got 1,000 charging cycles, maybe 2,000. Would you like to have 100,000? So that is technology that's within our grasp with graphene. Again, I've talked about sort of the baseline of batteries. That's not the goal of the book, it's to talk about atomic batteries. So as I explained earlier, atomic batteries, the goal is to have a synthetic isotope that doesn't have true radiation that can harm human beings, or have a half-life that doesn't really affect us. If you can, I'm not going to explain all the components of atomic battery, but you do have a component inside, right, synthetic or otherwise, that we're getting this sort of flow from. But what's important with graphene is it may not be that fuel, however, every component you see in here, the metal rings, the sheeting, the insulation, the assembly, the heat dissipation blocks, the micro insulation, all this can be either graphene-based or pure graphene, which, again, synthesizing pure graphene has not a big roadblock, but it's a little expensive to get the purest components, but you can see where we're going with this. If you're able to do amazing things with current lithium battery tech, atomic batteries, which some of you have heard of, have already been patented. There are companies that are going to be producing this. And graphene, or a substance like it, most likely graphene, is going to enter the market very quickly because they want to keep those safe. They want it to be in your electric scooter. You can't do that right now. You don't want to be riding on an atomic battery. But with graphene, that dream is achievable. Okay. Before we get to another critical checkpoint, we want to stoke everyone's curiosity, and you can tell these are tough topics to grasp. I have to show some examples to explain how graphene is an integrator. But in the book, what we have is a fiction part. Not only is this a technical book, we've had a fiction track to it, a fictitious story. So I'm just going to read from it very quickly so you can understand how we've kind of integrated it a little bit with, you know, Dan Brown-esque elements of surprise laced in. Reeves stood at the edge of the room, a silent guardian. Graphene is conductive, Anya said, beginning crisply. That's the edge we've got. Novak's going to hit us. Atomic batteries, that's a game changer, said Kai. But they're junk if Novak hijacks our supply chain. Elena nodded, her voice grim. Every piece matters. If one goes falter, the whole bridge goes down. Reeves finally spoke, and it was in a low but forceful tone. You have made something remarkable. And you can find out how that ends in early spring when the book comes out. Okay, so that was just a little break from how graphene components can come together with AI, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. But there are some considerations and challenges. We spoke about an ethical consideration earlier, but that's not the only one. There's a challenge here in high production costs. We go into per gram production costs of graphene, and they're not as bad, but the data's all over the place. It's going to take a while for that supply chain to become sustainable. So one of the entry challenges sort of for graphene as an element in the industry right now is high production costs and scalability. Next, we've already spoken about the AI risks and quantum systems through cryptography, hardening those systems. That's something to be aware of. Last but not least, we have an energy crisis on the planet right now. There's something that we need to sustain. We have to figure that out very quickly, right? But we also have to understand what's the balance. Where are you going to toe the line? Are you going to continue to disrupt and consume more? Are you going to fix something? Are you going to fix that hole in the ozone? Are you gonna solve the energy crisis, right? With rising temperatures, everyone needs to use an AC. Well, in other countries where there's no reliable source of power, what do they do, right? So we have to think about sustainability at the same time. We need a very good solution that can hold its own for years to come, not be replaced often. So the big takeaway here is high production costs, scalability concerns, privacy, security risks as sort of barriers and challenges that we need to be aware of. Okay, we're getting to almost the last checkpoint here. We've spoken about challenges with graphene. What's the barrier to entry? What's the barrier to adopt graphene? Do you think it's cost, regulation, public awareness? I know 20 people here are aware of it now. Okay, it's not C for me, but what do you guys think?
All of the
All the above? Oh my gosh, I'm not even gonna go tell people about graphene. You're not gonna stay quiet. Okay, yeah, okay, it is all of the above. Because what's gonna happen with any new technology is hindrance to adopt it, right? And in the upcoming slides, we'll talk about what that is. We've taken an academic survey, government funding, these kinds of things that are blocking cross-ventilation, right? And obviously there's high cost. The cost gets mitigated very quickly. When you have low supply and high demand, the cost goes. Okay,
It's the same thing when solar tech was coming in the starting.
Exactly.
I mean, in the starting it was very high, and then slowly when you had mass production, the cost
Correct.
came down.
I think Israel is per capita the biggest consumer of solar tech. Every roof has a solar panel. But that wasn't the case when it came out, correct? It didn't even hold charge that well, voltaic batteries and cells and stuff, but then that technology got everywhere, So that's a good point. Solar is a good example, but now it's sustainable. But would you put it on a spaceship and forget it? No.
No.
It's not gonna hold its weight, it's gonna burn when you get closer, you get past a certain ring in the solar system. But something like graphene can hold its own in space tech, right? So I'm glad you mentioned solar. Any other takers? Anybody who's just gonna say, just cost alone, or is everybody hung up on all of the above? I think I'm reading the room, it's all of the above. Okay, I get that. All right, I think we're getting very close. So there's some recommended next steps for you as readers, but also for the larger industry. So as I mentioned, there needs to be more improvement and investment in research and development. You can't develop a new technology in isolation. You have to have cross-ventilation, so cross-disciplinary research to scale graphene production. And then collaboration between academia and the private sector and the government sector. If you look at how graphene came up, it was just private, it was just academia, and now companies are kind of putting two and two together, but it's still not completely integrated. So that's something that the industry as a whole, policymakers have to do from an ESG governance standpoint. It's not just good to be able to do that and not govern it, right? Everybody's going to make their offshoots, so it needs to be responsible. And then ethical frameworks, something like a fabric, a data fabric, an AI fabric. There needs to be a graphene fabric that we've modeled this, and we've showcased how it's going to be helpful. Call it the AI fabric, but it's readily extendable to graphene in the book. And then obviously, folks such as yourself, encouraging the young minds, the bright minds, to shape the future of graphene so that STEM education can be the tip of the spear, not the butt of it, okay? And that's what the industry needs to do. But we, as curious readers, and that's what we think about in the book too, the book's written for everybody. You don't have to be a PhD student to read this book. As long as you have a curious mind, you're curious about technology, you want to change something, the book is for you. So as readers, as informed readers, follow graphene, look at AI developments, look at the integration, and build some cross-disciplinary expertise. Don't be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Look at graphene, look at something else. I'm always curious about the next graphene. You're just talking about a book. There's another material? Sure, there are nuclear isotopes that occur in nature that graphene can be paired with even, right? That's on the atomic battery side, of course. So always be curious about cross-discipline research and how a different industry is revolutionizing a new material or capability. Last but not least, leverage, talk, experiment, fail fast, know what works. So your biggest weapon would be leveraging your networking, career opportunities, failing fast, doing micro experiments and understanding where you would see yourself with this. If you can demonstrate it, but I will say this as a Toastmaster, as a distinguished Toastmaster, we're taught that speaking is one way of learning, communicating, right? Writing it down improves memory, but retaining what you've learned happens when you teach something, up to 95%. If you just hear somebody talk about it, you may not absorb more than 10, 15%. But as you apply that to your experiments, to your code, to your proposals at startups and whatever else, you will gain more expertise. Because you'll be forced to look at research that you're not comfortable with right now, and you'll be going in that new direction. You'll have novel ideas. So I think this is the most critical aspect. Okay, the coveted QR codes that I promised earlier. I will provide this to Devansh as well later, but if you want to connect with me, the first QR code will get you there on LinkedIn, and that's where you'll get more news about the book launch. The book comes out in spring 2025. It'll be available via Amazon, and later on there'll be a audio version, an audible version possibly, but an ebook and a paperback will be available. The second QR code is for roles at Hitachi Vantara. Please explore Hitachi Vantara and also the larger Hitachi. As we connect, I can guide you through that. Last but not least, Toastmasters and public speaking. There is a chapter here at Georgia State, but I represent d44toastmasters.org, where I'm a division director. You can use this to get more information about that and bridge the gap between your own ambitions. With that, I think we're at the official Q&A. We have an open floor. I'm always grateful for the privilege of your time and attention, but let's get to any questions. Yes, sir.
So what are your thoughts on like theoretical concepts like the quantum web?
Quantum web. Okay, we'll get to it right away. Would you want to give us a 10-second definition of what the quantum web is to you, and then we'll get into what I think. Is that fair?
Yeah, so
Okay.
what I think is like when quantum computing becomes more mainstream, we'll develop some sort of quantum web to make the information process faster than problem solving. It's going to be like a whole web space.
Okay. I think that's fair. That could be the quantum web, where you have near instantaneous problem-solving power, machine crunching power at your fingertips, right? I think we will get there. I think there are going to be some precursors to the quantum web, which we're seeing. So having a quantum computer that you can use, as excess, anything as a service, that's not quite the quantum web, but that's the baseline. That's how ARPANET got started, right? That's how a lot of projects like Tor got started.
Right.
So I do think to enable the quantum web, we need something like agentic AI, which is now coming up. A lot of people go, oh, that's just a script running AI. Well, yes and no, it does a lot more if you know what you're doing. It has more horsepower. It can go do more automation tasks. It can do something that heretofore was unheard of, where you have to code and figure out logistically what Prolog does. Well, an agentic AI script can accomplish. But you need that for the quantum web to be successful. So I think it's in its infancy. I think it is completely theoretical. But in terms of what it can solve, it could be phenomenal. Right now, you could give some agentic task, walk away, and with some hit ratio of 80%, you'll have accuracy. That's okay for your textbook project. You don't want your physician saying, I looked at your cold, I'm 80% certain you don't have cancer. You'll go, that's not good enough for me. So I do think it's in its infancy. And as we have an agentic AI sort of push, we have to have that for the quantum realm, if you will, for quantum computing. The majora particles type of chips, those are going to be leading agentic quantum, not quantum computing by itself. I have a lot of respect for the sort of forefounders of quantum computing, like Google's quantum computer, IBM, they've done a lot, but that's not going to be enough to do agentic quantum. So I see the agentic quantum computing aspect mimicking what's happening right now with agentic AI, and I think that will make it a little more mainstream. So people may not need to know how to code or understand quantum computing, as long as they can say, here's a problem, I heard it, and this quantum will solve it for me.
Right.
I think that also goes in line with the ESG sort of framework. The governance has to be so high so that nefarious activities won't take place with normal users. Of course, you may be an advanced researcher and we open admin mode for you and you can do more things. So I think there's going to be a barrier between research and mainstream adoption of that quantum web, and this is how we will get there.
Right.
Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I do.
Great question. I like that one. Questions, comments? Give him an opportunity and then we'll come right back. Yes, sir.
So with like graphene, you said cost is one of the issues to it. So in terms of research, has like governments or government bodies related to at least like the science department helped like research through funding and such?
Yes.
Because I'm mainly thinking about China and the U.S. for
Yeah.
example.
Correct. So, we don't have the data quite on what China has done overall in the U.S., but I can say that the private university funding has been accelerated a little bit with government interest in graphene. So previously, 10 years ago, the pools were very limited for graphene research. Now, you can go look at applied materials. They do quantum chips, by the way, and they have graphene patents. Doesn't take a bright mind to put two and two together, but something is happening there. There was a rumor, an academic rumor last year, I don't know where it started, at Harvard or where it was, I can't authenticate that, but the iPhone 16 was supposed to have a graphic heatsink, a graphene heatsink, supposedly. But the high cost was a barrier for that. Oh, it would have been amazing if that came out. Your iPhone would not get hot, the GPU cycles would be different, right? Maybe even not as just a heatsink, but a battery component. So I do think we are seeing those markers for government funding. Right now, it's not leading the charge, but it is helping private institutions and academia. But maybe what needs to happen is a tsunami type of event where they go, oh my gosh, everyone's going to jump on board, right? We're seeing that a lot with AI, but with graphene, it's still a lot more academia. And I think as it gets integrated in more things like lithium-ion batteries and sensors, you're going to see more of a commercial push, a commercialization of this, will happen. Great. I think there was one more question there somewhere. Yes.
So you said your major was in biology too, right?
My undergrad from the University of Georgia was in biology. I was a pre-med student, biochem researcher, so I've always been curious about material science and the human body and the mind. I was very interested in being a neurosurgeon. So I'm always looking at anything like a neural network. To me, it's going, okay, what's happening there? There's some sort of a hidden network in between. That's how you get the outputs. That's also what leads to inaccuracies. Because we've just modeled something on a neural network we don't understand, that we didn't create in that sense, but we modeled it very well. So I don't have a diagram of that, but when you have a neural network, a GAN, deep, CNN, whatever it is, you have inputs, nodes. You have a hidden network in between that's not shown, and you have outputs. If you keep on doing the same thing, you get something called a echo gland chamber, mistakes, hallucinations. Easy to fix, but once you get used to those answers, you take it for granted. So there is a direct link, believe it or not, between biology and neural networks and science, and we can still learn from that and say, okay, here's how we self-correct, course correct. But yeah, biology just does drive my desire to learn more.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, what are your thoughts, on, like, are we the great, like, how can we use AI and quantum computing to, like, enhance our longevity?
Ooh, longevity as in our lifespan?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Okay, I do have some thoughts. I think some of the things that can help with is when you go below nano, again, this is like a deep biology topic. If you go smaller in the human body, you have better drug delivery mechanisms. You can filter toxins. You need a filtrant that's not going to get toxic by itself, by nature, or withstand all this degradation. And graphene in one of the tables I showed you, right? Have some thoughts there on those delivery mechanisms. So that can enhance life. In terms of longevity, you can still trip and fall. But again, you can have other mechanisms that are integrated with this sort of advanced technology to help safeguard that aspect. There's no substitute for science. But think about it. If you're going out there, you're working out, and you're breathing in, so ppm, parts per million, the toxicity levels in Atlanta, the smog and stuff, maybe we're hitting 50 or 60, But in New Delhi, during a season called Diwali, it goes up to 600. And that's something we can control via purification.